Artificial selection, the selection of art. Presented by David R. Wood. Artificial selection, the selection of art. Quote, there must be a selection, artificial selection. Let us note among the guardians those who in their whole life show the greatest eagerness to do what is for the good of their country, and the greatest repugnance to do what is against their interests. Those are the right men. End quote. Plato, The Republic. The ancient Greek philosophers were evolutionary scientists. They utilized Homo sapiens' most powerful natural adaptation, imagination, to discover the pattern of evolution. However, the ancient Greeks would have called it, quote, the pattern of the gods in nature, end quote. Charles and Erasmus Darwin partially adopted the ancient Greek point of view. This enabled them to perceive the conceptual patterns of evolution in ancient Greek philosophy. They then mined ancient Greek texts to assemble the underlying conceptual pattern. It was this underlying pattern that Charles and Erasmus leveraged to develop the theory of natural evolution. However, selective breeding is not artificial selection. Selective breeding is just a form of sexual selection, albeit an artificial one. This means that artificial selection is not part of the pattern of natural evolution. It appears that artificial selection is part of an entirely different pattern the ancient Greek philosophers discovered. Given these facts, we need a new definition for the concept of artificial selection. Artificial selection is the process by which new and existing art is intentionally selected by Homo sapiens for use in human activity. The intentionality of artificial selection requires conscious thought to perform. This is why on Earth only Homo sapiens, at least we think, can perform artificial selection. It is what distinctly separates us from every other natural species. It is why we are the keystone natural species on the planet. During artificial selection, Homo sapiens select artificial adaptations, i.e. art, for use in either artificial, e.g. sports, business, etc., and or natural, e.g. warfare, mating, etc., competitive context. The art is selected for its evolutionary value for survival, mating, pleasure, etc. Artificial selection is performed by both individuals and groups of Homo sapiens. If you are listening to this sentence, you artificially selected this video, i.e. art, when you clicked on it. Artificial selection functions exactly the opposite of natural selection. Art is not self-sorted randomly, but is sorted with intentionality by Homo sapiens. Over time, Homo sapiens intentionally produce new art forms. The most beneficial art is then artificially selected by Homo sapiens and reproduced in increasing quantities. Often, the new art is an improvement or an enhancement of existing art. This is accomplished via the process of conceptual selection, an artificial variation of the process of sexual selection. This effectively evolves the art form along an adaptive trajectory. This is a variation of the process of natural evolution, but it isn't natural. It is artificial. Interestingly, just as in natural evolution, variations of similar patterns are artificially selected by Homo sapiens again and again. An example is projectile weapons. Beginning with the sling, Homo sapiens have incrementally evolved the concept and art of projectile weapons. This has led us to assault rifles, cruise missiles, and nuclear missiles that essentially perform the same basic function in warfare. However, this function is performed on a scale and with a severity unimaginable when the first projectile weapon was invented. As once again we return to Charles Darwin's profound insight from his book on the origin of artificial species. Quote, we can, in short, see why nature is prodigal in variety, though niggard in innovation. But why this should be a law of nature if each species has independently created, no man can explain. Many other facts are, as it seems to me, explicable on this theory. These facts cease to be strange, or might even have been anticipated. End quote. Why is art produced by Homo sapiens so essentially prodigal in variety, yet niggard in innovation? This is due to the same reasons the pattern of a crab is consistently advantageous in natural evolution. The environmental and competitive patterns in both natural and artificial evolution repeat. Otherwise, we wouldn't have evolved projectile weapons from the sling to the assault rifle so predictably. As the patterns of natural law and evolution continue to repeat, variations of the same phenotypic patterns will tend to be selected, both naturally and artificially. Below are some examples of artificial selection familiar to us all. Selective breeding. Homo sapiens artificially select the bred offspring. The selection takes place after the offspring are produced, not before. Voting. Homo sapiens perform the act of voting in democratic systems of government. The art form being selected are political candidates. A candidate is a combination of naturally inherited and artificially adapted phenotypic traits. However, together the pattern of a candidate and his or her specific policy platform are essentially a form of art. Voting for a candidate is the act of artificial selection. Purchasing. Homo sapiens perform the act of purchasing in economic systems. Things purchased are generally products or services. Both are art forms. Products are artificial structural adaptations. Services are typically a combination of artificial adaptations, the artificial objects and instincts, and natural adaptations, the people and their natural instincts. When you make a purchase from a business, you artificially select the artificial variation they produced. Dressing. Homo sapiens perform the act of dressing each day. Dressing involves the act of artificial selection. Each piece of clothing is art and is artificially selected to be worn. However, dressing also involves conceptual selection. The selection of entire outfit to produce a specific look is a form of self-expression or art. The total outfit pattern is conceptually selected, and then each piece of clothing is artificially selected to fit that pattern. This is an example of where the two forms of selection, conceptual selection and artificial selection, work together seamlessly in human activity. This is what the concept of artificial selection really means: to select artificial adaptations for use in human activity. Artificial adaptations enhance our species' chances of being naturally selected in the struggle for existence. It is our capacity to exercise intentional selection of artificial adaptations that has enabled us to become the keystone species on Earth and ensured our species continually gets naturally selected for existence in evolution's daily survival of the fittest contest.